Hello! This lesson will be about the passive voice found in the American way. Lesson 29. There are two voices in English, and by voice, I mean who is doing the action. We have passive and we have active. Normally, people use the active voice. The subject is doing the action. You can see on page 114. Sam sees the house. Sam is the subject. He sees the house. The house is the object and sees is the verb. Very simple. Subject plus verb plus object. Very common. Subject, verb, object. This is the way we read or hear most sentences. But we do also use the passive voice quite often. The passive voice is when the object is doing the action. Instead of the subject, it's the object that is doing whatever the sentence is talking about. So to change Sam sees the house from active to passive, you would write the house is seen by Sam. The house is seen by Sam. So, we have the sentence, or the verb phrase is seen. Helping verb plus action verb, if you remember from a previous lesson. So the helping verb here is. When you want to make the passive, as you can see from the book, it's a 4-step process. So what are the 4 steps? Well, as you can see from the sentence, Mrs. Miller hired Richard on page 115, you find the subject, you find the verb, and you find the object. So this is the easiest thing to do. In this sentence, the object is Richard. The verb is hired. And I'll write MM, Ms. Miller, or Mrs. Miller, is the subject. So, we need to make the object do the action. Now, this is where it gets very confusing, because it becomes more like math than language. You have to think about adding 2 ideas together. And sometimes you have to add maybe 3 ideas together. Because every verb tense, almost every verb tense, has a passive version. So in this case, we are looking at the past simple. Here, with is, we were looking at the present simple. So we need to think about our helping verb and then our action verb. Sometimes with more difficult verb tenses like future continuous or past perfect continuous, you may have more than one helping verb that you have to add together. So you might have helping verb, action verb. And it gets very confusing. But we're going to keep it simple for right now. So hired, we need a helping verb. Well, we have Richard will be our new subject. So Richard is 3rd person, the same as he, so we use was. Right? It's either going to be was or were in the past simple. So in this case it's was. Now we need the past participle. You remember about participles, a kind of verbal, also called verb 3. To make this complete, we're not going to use this extra one. We only have 2 to this one because it's past simple. It's more simple than using continuous. So was plus, what's the action? Hire, to give someone a job. So Richard was hired. Verb 3 of hire, spelled H-I-R-E, is hired. Hire, hired, hired. Just like eat, ate, eaten. If you don't know your verbs, see, saw, seen, there's a long list, you really need to memorize them. It's very important to have all those verbs in the back of your head and be able to use them quickly. I know it's difficult, but it's a very necessary part of learning English. Let's try an example that's not in the book. So I have here a new sentence. Tom kicked 2 soccer balls. I switched to blue because my black was running out of ink. And here's my picture of a soccer ball, in case you don't know. Soccer is the American word for football. So, Tom kicked 2 soccer balls. Now, how do we change this to passive voice? Right now it's in active. So we find the subject, the verb, and the object. So, let's think about our 4-step process that's listed in the book. So we need to write the object first. 2 soccer balls. Now we're going to need a helping verb and an action verb. More than one, so not was, but were. Now we have kick, kick, kicked, kicked. Verb 3 is kicked. Then we add the preposition by. Should add that here. Helping verb, action verb, and then always by. And then the subject of the old sentence, which in this case is Tom. So 2 soccer balls were kicked by Tom. Very simple. Now that's an example of past tense. You also can use the present or the future. So in the book, you should have tried the examples, problems on page 116, changing from active to passive. Now on page 117, you change passive to active. And this is a much simpler process. Only 3 steps. So in this one, Mrs. Miller thanked Richard. So we'll use our same example, but change the verb from hired to thank. And it's the past tense. Was thanked. So Mrs. Miller was thanked by Richard. So Richard is doing the action, remember? He will be our new subject. Thank will be our verb. And Mrs. Miller will be our object. So how do we do it? Well, like I said, find the real subject, Richard. He's the one doing the action. He's the main person. Richard. Then we use thank, but we need to keep the same verb tense. Past tense, so keep the ed. Alright, never change the verb tense when switching from active to passive or passive to active. You need to keep the same verb tense so the meaning is the same. Richard thanked Mrs. Miller. So now we have what was a passive sentence and is now an active sentence. And you can try more of those on page 117. There's more for you to do. Now on page 118, I list reasons for using the passive voice. There are maybe more reasons than this, but these are the most common. When it is not important to know who or what does an action. Remember that with a passive sentence, you don't have to include who is doing the action. So for this example, 2 soccer balls were kicked by Tom. We can cut out by Tom, add our period here, and we still have a complete sentence. Subject, 2 soccer balls, and the verb, were kicked. Complete sentence, ending punctuation. You don't have to say who or whom or what is doing the action. So packages are delivered twice a day, but are picked up only once a day. By whom? Probably a mailman or someone who works at the post office. But you don't have to say that. And maybe you don't want to say that. It's not interesting information. People know already that the people at the post office pick up and deliver packages. Example 2, when it is not known who or what does an action. Maybe you don't know. My purse was stolen. Really? By whom? Well, I don't know. They took it and I didn't see them. The purse was stolen. So if you don't know the subject, it's easy to use the passive voice. The third way, when you want to focus on an action rather than on who or what does the action. If the new law is passed, everyone will have to wear motorcycle helmets. Now for this example, we know who passes the law. The government. The government makes new laws. But we don't want to focus on the government, we want to focus on the law. The law is the important part. The writer thinks it's a bad law. If the law is passed, by whom? By the government. But the writer doesn't care about the government, they care about the law. So that's why in this case, the passive voice is a good choice. Make the law the subject. The law is the important part, not the government. And finally, when general statements are made about an action, tourists in Thailand are treated extremely well when they stay at resorts in Phuket. Treated well by whom? Well, hotel staff in Phuket. But again, that's not important information. It's just a general statement about all tourists staying at hotels in Phuket. It doesn't have to be specific. You don't need a specific subject. The object is the important part. Tourists at hotels in Phuket. So I hope you found this all interesting. Remember your 4-step process from active to passive and your 3-step process from passive to active. Also remember the 4 reasons why people most often use the passive voice. I did examples in both the present simple and the past simple. These are the easiest. I recommend you also look at past perfect, present continuous, past continuous, past perfect. Learn the passive voice for the most common verb tenses. And don't worry about the extremely difficult ones that people just don't use very often. So, if you have any questions, please feel free to write on either social media or email. We're always here to help. Thank you very much.